Close your eyes and let the room grow soft around the edges, like a shoreline blurred by a gentle fog. Your breath moves in and out with the ease of a slow tide. Each exhale unthreads a little more of the day, and each inhale gathers a quiet you can keep. The bed holds you the way a small boat holds a sleeping passenger, with just enough sway to remind you that you are carried, that you are safe, that drifting is the natural way of things when the night is kind. The light outside lowers its voice. The air takes on that calm, almost weightless quality that appears when we allow the world to be simple. You are ready for a long, unhurried story. You are ready to be walked softly through a question that is far older than any clock, and yet feels as gentle as a lullaby. Why does space bend? Imagine yourself in a vast, quiet field after sunset. The last color has emptied from the horizon, and a wide river of faint starlight begins to arch from one side of the sky to the other. You stand very still. You notice, in your own posture, a listening you do not have to force. You do not need to reach. The stars arrive at your eyes without effort. They have always been on their way. You are simply present for their arriving. That same quality, that same ease lives in the way the universe guides motion. It is not a stiff guidance. It is not a scolding rule. It is a soft shape that says, "Here is the smoothest way. Here is the line of least resistance. Here is a curve that carries you without argument." Think of the first straight line you ever trusted. A piece of string pulled between 2 points, a ruler set on a desk, the edge of a page. Straight seems obvious on a flat table, but the world beneath your feet is not a table, it is round and it is generous. Picture yourself walking across a planet so large that the ground feels flat only because you are small. You choose a direction and you keep it. You do not turn left or right. You do not zig or zag. Hours melt into days, and days melt into longer spans, and still you keep the direction. One morning, with a quiet surprise that feels like remembering rather than discovering, you find yourself back where you began. You never once tried to curve your path. You honored straightness with every step you took, and yet the surface shaped your journey into a wide circle. That is the first whisper of what straightness truly means in a curved world. It is not the stubborn insistence on a flat diagram. It is the faithful keeping of a direction inside a geometry that has grace. Travelers have a word for this path: geodesic. A geodesic is the route you follow when you refuse to push sideways. On a sphere, it is the great circle a plane takes when it wants to go far using less fuel. On a softly warped surface, it is the open secret of efficient motion. The beauty of a geodesic is that it does not feel like a compromise. It feels like relief. It feels like the road itself has decided to be kind. When we speak of space bending, we are really speaking of the way geodesics behave in a fabric that can dip and swell. A fabric that notices mass and energy and accommodates them the way a well-made hammock accommodates a body. No squeak, no strain, just a settling that lets rest and motion coexist. You have felt a cousin of this in your own body. When you carry a heavy bag and then set it down, your shoulders do not argue. They soften. They return to a shape that costs less. The universe does a similar softening around whatever is present. A star presses into the fabric of space and time, and the fabric relents in a way that is elegant and calm. A planet rolls along the shape of that relenting. It is not being tugged by an invisible rope. It is not on a hook. It is following the simplest hallway available. Straight in that hallway is curved when drawn on a flat map, but the traveler does not know a map. The traveler knows the hallway, and the hallway is honest. Now let the picture slide from walking to floating. Inside a quiet spacecraft, an astronaut who releases a handrail does not step into emptiness. The astronaut steps into cooperation. Body, ship, and nearby objects all begin to drift together, each honoring the same local straightness at the same time. To someone watching with a mind trained by flat diagrams, it might look as if gravity has gone missing. But gravity has not left the room. Gravity is the shape of the room. The astronaut is not free of it. The astronaut is free inside it, freed from pushing against the floor because the floor is dropping away in perfect sympathy. Orbit is this sympathy perfected. A planet perpetually falls around a star. The floor drops forever. The motion never collides with the source of its curve because the curve itself keeps the motion gliding. There is a sentence that has been spoken, gently, for more than a century now, one that wraps the big idea in a scarf of plain language. Mass tells space and time how to curve, and the curvature of space and time tells mass how to move. You can hold this sentence the way you hold a smooth river stone in the palm of your hand. It does not cut. It does not demand anything harsh. It simply replaces the picture of tethers and pulleys with the picture of a responsive stage. Imagine a theater where the floor rises a little under the feet of one actor and lowers a little under the feet of another. And imagine that the choreography itself is nothing more than the dancers choosing, always, to walk the easiest line across that responsive floor. The performance would look intricate, but the rule would be simple. The complexity would emerge from softness, not from strain. Let a star sit on the fabric. See the fabric gather, not like a hole torn in a sheet, but like a calm cradle in a quilt. Let a planet approach. The planet takes the path that asks for the least correction. It circles, not because it is forced, but because circling is the straightest thing to do in a world that is rounder than a flat picture can show. If the star were somehow removed, the planet would trace a new straightness, drifting on in the direction it had when the cradle was released, much as a marble rolls out of a shallow bowl and keeps going when the bowl is lifted away. The rule is always the same: follow the hallway. The hallway is the curvature. The curvature is the way presence changes possibility. You can listen for this in ordinary life. Clocks on mountaintops and clocks in valleys do not agree perfectly. The difference is so small that only patient instruments can conjure it into numbers, yet it is as real as the softness of a pillow. Time in a deeper cradle of gravity runs just a bit slower than time in a shallower cradle. Near the surface of Earth, the change is modest, but still it matters enough that navigational systems must whisper corrections to themselves every moment. The satellite high above you keeps time differently than a device in your pocket, without correcting for the gentle flex of space and the gentle lean of time. A map would wander, and a traveler would become lost on streets that have not moved. The fact that a small icon can show you turning left at the right moment is a practical lullaby written by the universe's geometry. Light itself is a listener, even though light is the most determined traveler we know. Even though it seems to hurry with perfect steadiness, it still honors the hallway. When a beam passes near a massive body, it does not cut across the bowed floor. It takes the floor's shape as advice and follows a curve that belongs to the fabric, not to the vanity of the beam. From far away, when we look at a heavy cluster of galaxies holding court in a corner of the sky, we sometimes see a single more distant galaxy split into multiple images or stretched into an arc. The effect is not a trick played on us by a mischievous universe. It is a revelation of the hallway, a ghostly pencil line tracing the curve that light chose. We call this lensing. It is a soft handwriting in the margins of the sky that spells out where mass is, even when that mass is otherwise invisible. Let your thoughts move to the most intense cradles and the faintest waves. Some regions of space are cupped so completely that inside a certain boundary every path points inward. Nothing that crosses that threshold can move in any way that allows a return. Outside that boundary, however, light can still be bent in dramatic arcs. Around such regions we see rings and crescents and distorted knots of light, like reflections on the inside of a hand-blown glass bowl. It is tempting to think of these places as fierce and unfriendly. But here, in the slow hour of this telling, see them as perfect statements made by the fabric when it is asked the question, "How much can you gather?" A black hole is not a rage. It is a limit reached. It is the absolute version of the same answer you feel when you sink into a mattress and the mattress says, "I will hold you." The fabric does more than cradle. It can ripple. When two heavy stars orbit one another for a long time, they send whispers outward through the structure that holds them. Those whispers are waves in the shape of space and the rhythm of time. The waves travel outward, diluting, 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 until they are softer than anything else we know how to measure. And yet, with long arms and exquisite patience, instruments have felt them. They arrive as a change smaller than a fraction of a hair spread across a span wider than a city. They are proof that even calmness can carry news. They are a chorus of distant events, a way for the universe to hum to itself about its own motions. Now invite your attention to an even larger scale, one on which every galaxy you have ever seen in a picture becomes a tiny fleck. On this scale, something quieter than a wave and more universal than a cradle is happening. Space itself is stretching. Picture a pattern printed on a soft cloth. If the cloth is pulled gently from all sides, the shapes move apart from one another, not because they are sliding over the surface, but because the surface is offering them more room. On the grandest scales, the distances between clusters of galaxies increase in this way. No explosion is sending them into an outside. There is no outside to fly into. The hallway is getting wider everywhere at once. This expansion is not the same as curvature. Curvature is the shape within a neighborhood. Expansion is the changing scale of the entire neighborhood itself. The two are partners. The local valley can be curved one way while the faraway hills move apart in another. It helps to remember that none of these behaviors need be loud. The loudness is in our amazement. The phenomena themselves can be as quiet as a held breath. The bending near you is gentle. The rippling is faint. The expansion is slow. These are not the dramas of a storm, but the long confidences of a climate. When we make metaphors, we choose trampolines and rubber sheets and bowling balls. Those are fine ladders for a climb toward understanding. But once you are high enough to see the view, set the ladders down. Replace the image of a ball making a dent with a feeling of a shawl draping over a shoulder. Replace the image of tension with the feeling of accommodation. The universe is not an engine straining at its bolts. It is a posture of welcome, a geometry that says yes to presence and then guides motion by agreeing with it. Consider a small thought experiment you can run in your imagination. You are aboard a silent elevator in deep space, far from any star, far from any planet. The car begins to accelerate upward. You drop a key. It falls to the floor just as it would if you were in a building on Earth. In one situation, the floor rises to meet the key because of the engine that pushes the elevator. In the other situation, the floor rises to meet the key because the shape of space and time directs both key and elevator toward one another. Locally, the feelings match. That matching is not a coincidence. It is a clue sewn into the hem of reality, an equivalence that says gravity and acceleration rhyme. What you call weight is the story your body tells when it is prevented from following its own geodesic. Remove the prevention and the story changes. The body relaxes into free fall and finds that nothing has to be held up when everything is allowed to follow the hallway. Why? Let the scale shrink again. Return to the ground where you live, where you pour tea, where you tie your shoes. Time here is tilted by Earth's presence. The tilt is gentle but measurable, and we have learned to honor it so that our tools remain faithful. When signals are sent between a receiver on the ground and a clock aboard a satellite, the difference in rhythms is accounted for with care. Without those adjustments, your navigation would drift by the length of a city block or more each day, and a line on a screen that pretends to be a road would not match the road itself. The technologies that feel ordinary are revealed to be little celebrations of curvature. Engineering is a lullaby that science has sung into circuits. Light from distant galaxies threads its way to us along routes chosen by the fabric. When it passes near great congregations of matter, it bows a little. The bowing draws graceful, arc-shaped signatures on the sky. By reading those signatures with patient instruments and careful math, we infer the presence of matter that does not shine. That invisible matter, gathered in halos around galaxies and woven through the vast spaces between, is known by what it asks light to do. We do not see it, but we see its advice. In that way, the universe shares with us a secret too shy for direct introduction. Curvature becomes a translator, helping us greet an unseen guest. Perhaps you worry that this is all a bit large to carry into sleep. Let the worry shrink. The mind does not need to hold diagrams to be comforted. It need only be convinced that the world is not a place of arbitrary orders but a place of coherence. Curvature is coherence made visible. It unites the fall of an apple with the orbit of a moon, the tick of a clock with the path of a photon, the ripple of a wave with the hush of an expansion you can feel only by comparing the deep past to the far future. This unity is not a strict braid. It is a slipknot that tightens when pulled and loosens when at rest. You can lean into it and it will hold. You can relax into it and it will cradle. Let us return to the image of the great circle. Place your finger on a globe. Trace a path that never turns. The line you draw may look curved when you sketch it on a flat page, but that is because the page is telling only part of the truth. Now imagine space itself as the globe and movement as the finger. Everything that moves, from dust to light to whole galaxies, traces the easiest line offered by the surface it inhabits. When mass is added, the surface adjusts, and the easiest lines adjust as well. There is a feedback here, but it is not a chain tugging at its own links. It is a conversation in which each speaker is respectful, in which each sentence makes room for the next. Even the idea of straightness grows kinder under this view. On a sidewalk, straight might mean a tight line with no deviation. In a forest, straight might mean following the trail that curves gently around the roots of an old tree because trampling the roots would be a kind of violence. In space and time, straightness is like the forest's wisdom. It is not the line that ignores the world. It is the line that listens. It is a moral geometry, in a way, because it refuses to force. The extremes teach without shouting. In the neighborhood of a black hole, The geometry is so richly cupped that spools of time and bundles of space swap their roles in ways that push the edges of our intuition. Yet the rule is still the same. Follow the hallway. If you stand far outside and watch, you see light curve. You see orbits precess. You see the imprint of intense curvature on everything that tries to move nearby. If you could safely hover closer, the advice would be sterner but not different. This is the way. These are the lines that cost the least. When two heavy bodies spiral inward and finally merge, the waves they release carry away the final arrangement of their complicated dance. Long after the partners are gone, the ripples pass through us. They do not hurl us from our chairs or make the lakes lap their shores more eagerly. They are quieter than quiet, and yet they change a ruler's length by an amount so small it feels like a dare to try to notice it. We noticed. The first time the signal was seen, a thrill moved through rooms all over the world. Not because we love noise, but because we love confirmation that the calm story is true even in the presence of great mass and great speed. On yet larger scales, the expansion hums constantly. You cannot feel it between your hands. You cannot measure it with a yardstick held in a room. It belongs to the description of the room's membership in a far larger pattern. Galaxies that are not bound to one another by local curvature drift apart over the long hush of cosmic time because the cloth between them is offering them more and more room. The words here can be slippery. We want to say into what are they expanding. But there is no outside to walk into. The hallway widens. The distances grow. The geometry revises its own scale. You are not left behind by this. You are included in it. The atoms in your bones, forged in stars, are at rest inside local cradles. The grand drift happens across gulfs so wide that your life is a candle whose flame does not flicker. Down here, your breath continues its patient work. In and out, in and out. The curvature that guides planets also guides the falling of a raindrop past a window, the arc of a thrown ball, the slow creep of tides. The same principle prints itself in many fonts. When you let go of the need to control every path and instead choose the path that costs less, you are copying the cosmos. You are following a geodesic through your own day. You are easing into the hallway meant for you, not because a rule book scolded you, but because the floor itself invited you to walk this way. If you step outside again in your mind and look up, the Milky Way has brightened. It is a band of countless stars so numerous that your eye blurs them into a mist. That mist is an illusion created by distance, but it is also a promise made by geometry. Each point of light is an agreement between fusion and gravity, between pressure and curvature, between a star's birth cloud and the soft warps that guided that cloud into a spinning disk long ago. The arch you see across the sky is a line of sight along the plane of our galaxy, a geometry of orbits stacked like petals and braided like a river, all held by the same rule that keeps a marble circling inside a bowl that never quite ends. Return to Earth once more. You are held here by curvature, though it feels like weight. If the ground vanishes beneath your feet, you fall. If a floor waits beneath you, the floor gives you news. You are not following your geodesic today. You are following mine. Sit. Lie down. Allow the floor to carry you. Allow the bed to carry you. The weight becomes a language of support rather than a language of struggle. Space bends around Earth. Time leans. Light bows. Clocks adjust their voices to stay in choir. In this quiet drawing together, irritations become optional. In the presence of a story as large as this, small frictions release their hold. Think of a path you take often, perhaps around a lake or through a park. There is the straight line across the map that would cut through bushes and puddles, and then there is the curving path that respects the land. You choose the curving path because it is smoother and kinder, not because it gets you there faster. The cosmos chooses the same kind of grace. It always has. When we talk about efficiency in physics, we are not praising speed alone. We are praising ease. The planet eases into orbit. The photon eases around a mass. The wave eases through the universe. Even the expansion, which sounds like ambition, is ease expressed as more room. The question that began this journey can now rest. Why does space bend? Because presence asks it to, and because the most honest response to presence is accommodation. Because mass and energy are not invaders. They are guests, and the fabric is a generous host. It makes cradles and hallways and ripples and wide rooms. It leaves clues in time and in light so that creatures with small eyes and long desires can read the pattern and feel. Assess alone. It is not a force that jerks. It is an agreement that sings. Hold this understanding the way you hold the edge of a blanket as you tug it up toward your chin. Let the edges of thought blur. You do not need to keep reciting the details to believe in the kindness of the rule. Breathe, and the breath itself becomes a geodesic, a natural line through the landscape of your night. The story you have just heard is a long, slow river, and you have been floating on it without paddling. The banks were gentle. The water was clear. Now the river widens and slows further and becomes a still bay. In this stillness, there is one more small image to carry with you into sleep. Picture a small lantern set on a table near an open window. Outside, the dark is deep but never empty. The lantern's light does not fight the dark. It sits inside it the way a planet sits inside space. The dark accepts the lantern. The light accepts the dark. The air moves a little, and the flame listens and leans without going out. That leaning is not a failure. It is a conversation between the flame and the breeze, between presence and the shape that holds it. Space bends for the same reason the flame leans. Neither thing is broken by the interaction. Both are made complete. If, in the future, you find yourself restless and awake, you can return to any of these images and step back into the hallway. Walk the great circle on the round world. Let go of the handrail in the quiet ship. Trace the arc of starlight around an invisible mass. Stand at the edge of a field and feel the river of the Milky Way curve overhead. Imagine the wide cloth of the cosmos being offered a little more room as the ages pass. None of these are distant from you when you carry them the way you carry a memory of home. They live in the way you move when you choose ease. At last, come back to the first moments of this story. You are in a room that has grown soft. Your breath is the tide of a friendly sea. The bed is the boat. The night is the harbor. The question is answered not as a fact in a book, but as a felt shape in your body. The truest line is a curve. The curve is a kindness. The universe is patient, and so are you. Let the patience become sleep. Let the cradle hold. Let the hallway guide. Let the lantern dim. Let the river slow to glass. Let the story, and the space within it, bend around you until you and the world agree on the same gentle geometry of rest. We are going to wander together through a question that sounds big and mysterious, and yet wants only your calm attention. Why does space bend? Not as a test, not as a riddle with a single answer, but as a story whispered slowly, with kindness, and with room for wonder. As you breathe, picture a starry sky that does not sit above you like a ceiling. but surrounds you like a vast, patient ocean. In this ocean, the stars are lanterns, the planets are slow swimmers, and you are an unhurried traveler, content to float and listen. Think of the simplest idea of a straight line, the way a child might stretch a string between two fingertips. On a tabletop, that straightness is easy to trust, easy to draw with a ruler obvious as a horizon. Now breathe in and picture yourself very small, standing on the surface of a great sphere, a world so large that under your feet it looks flat. And yet, all around, it curves. If you walked straight ahead, step after gentle step, never turning left or right, you would still return to where you began, not because you curved your path, but because the space beneath your feet curved around you. This kind of path has a quiet name, geodesic. It is the line a traveler follows when the traveler never tries to turn, the path of least insistence, the way of going that argues with nothing. On a sphere, a geodesic is a great circle, like the equator or the soft arcs that airplanes follow across the globe, saving time by cooperating with the world's roundness. Here is the first small truth that will rock you gently to sleep. Straight is not the same as flat. Straight is about how you move, not what you think the floor should look like. When the floor itself is curved, straight becomes an adventure. Now breathe out, long and easy, as we drift from walking on spheres to falling in space. Imagine you are an astronaut who lets go inside a spaceship. You are weightless, not because gravity turned off, but because everything around you is tumbling along the same natural curve, a kind of surrender that feels like flight. People sometimes say that astronauts have escaped gravity, but what really happens is gentler and more elegant. They have joined the dance in which the floor keeps dropping away at just the right rate, so there is never a collision, only a continuing glide. A planet in orbit is doing the very same thing you are doing when you let go of a railing in a quiet cabin. It is following a geodesic through the curved fabric of space and time, which together form the stage on which all things move. If space were perfectly flat and empty, a thrown stone would go straight forever, and an orbit would be impossible. But space, like a sheet of silk under a sleeping cat, dips around mass and energy. The planet is not being yanked by an invisible string. It is simply choosing the easiest road in a landscape that has gentle hills and hollows sculpted by the presence of matter. Take another soft breath and remember that a curve can be calm. It is the arcing of a lullaby's melody, the rounding of a riverbank, the way a hand cups a candle to protect the flame. The universe does this cupping around stars, planets, and galaxies, and what we call free fall is the way everything relaxes into that roundedness, the way everything rides the river without paddling against it. A quiet century ago, a patient thinker stitched a new picture together and said, with humility, that mass tells space and time how to curve, and the curvature of space and time tells mass how to move. This is a soft sentence that can hold you like a blanket while you drift. There is no squeaking pulley, no frayed rope, no hook and eye of force tugging on planets like a stubborn hinge. Instead, there is geometry becoming nature, and nature becoming motion, a slow conversation between what is present and the stage that holds it. Close your eyes and picture space and time as a woven fabric, not a stiff canvas, but a shawl that drapes and yields. Set a bright star upon it, and the shawl gathers slightly like a hammock under a gentle weight. Set a planet upon the gathered shawl, and notice how the planet's easiest path curves around the star not because it is leashed, but because the fabric's shape whispers the route. In this picture, every traveler is a listener. The rules of motion are soft instructions in a language of curves, and bodies obey by relaxing. You might wonder if this is only a story, a bedtime metaphor with no teeth. But even in the hush of everyday living, the bending shows itself, if you know where to look and how to listen. Time itself leans near mountains. Clocks on high ground tick a breath faster than clocks in deep valleys, by a sliver so small you could miss it unless you are very patient and very precise. The whispers are tiny, but the universe is honest, and every tiny truth repeats itself, like a soft pattern woven through a quilt. Long before you lay down here to rest, people learned to correct for these truths in quiet machines high above the clouds. Those machines listen to signals that help someone on a road find the right turn. If those signals did not account for space and time bending near Earth, a map would drift and wander in a way that no traveler could trust. The fact that the map on your phone helps you find a warm cafe is a small daily miracle, born from the patient accounting of how space curves and how time keeps slightly different rhythms in slightly different places. Light, too, listens to the shape of space, even though light tries never to linger. Even though it moves with a kind of perfect urgency, it still follows the geodesics the universe provides. When light passes near a massive body, its straightness becomes an arc, and distant objects appear where they are not, or appear as more than one, a cosmic mirage. During a quiet eclipse, the starlight itself testifies that space is not a rigid hallway but a gentle corridor that can flex. Let your breath smooth out once more, and feel how each exhale is a small proof that letting go can be intelligent. The cosmos is filled with letting go. Stars let go of the pressure they hold inside and send winds across light years, and those winds are guided by curves for which no hand is needed. Galaxies drift through a web of shapes traced by dark matter, a kind of unseen scaffolding that suggests paths the way a memory suggests a melody. None of this is violent in the telling. It is the hush of tides moving under a moon. If space can bend gently, can it also bend intensely? There are places where the shawl is drawn so tight that nothing, not even a sliver of light, can pull free once it has crossed a certain ring of return. Think of a black hole not as a monster, but as an ultimate cup, a cupping so total that inside it, the right path for everything points inward. Outside that ring, light still curves and paints rings and arcs on the sky, as if the universe itself were making a gallery of ovals out of starlight. The sight of such arcs is not frightening when described softly. It is like watching ripples on a pond, only the pond is the shape of reality, and the pebbles are heavy stars. And space does not only bend in place, it can ripple in time. Like a field of tall grass crossing under a breeze, the fabric of space and time can carry waves. These waves begin when massive things in motion change their embrace of the fabric, when a pair of heavy stars swirl around one another and then join in a final hush. When those waves reach us, they bring with them the news of distant dances, a tapping so slight that a ruler longer than a continent would barely notice. To listen for such waves is to practice patience, to practice faith in tiny signals that say, over and over, that reality is supple. Now imagine a scale larger than any circle you can hold in your mind, a scale on which galaxies are like motes of dust in a sunbeam. On this scale, another story whispers, space itself is stretching. The distances between distant clusters of galaxies grow, not because something is exploding outward into a vacuum, but because the vacuum itself is growing its own room. This is expansion. a swelling of the stage that does not move any actor across the boards, but moves the boards themselves. It is different from curvature the way a lullaby is different from a heartbeat. One sets the tempo of the room, the other shapes the path within it. Expansion and curvature are partners, not rivals. Curvature tells a planet how to circle a star. Expansion tells faraway galaxies how to drift away from one another over great spans of time. In a small neighborhood, curvature is the gentle dipping of the shawl around a nearby mass. In the wide country beyond, expansion is the steady parting of the folds, the slow easing of the fabric's weave, like the rising of bread under a clean cloth. You can live your entire life in the curve of a local valley and never notice the rising of the land beyond the hills. And yet both are true, both are happening. Here is a comforting thought. All of this can be held in a single breath. Inhale and imagine using that breath to trace the path of a geodesic, a line of least insistence. Exhale and imagine the fabric welcoming you, shaping your motion with a kindness that does not command, only suggests. And you, being wise, follow. You might never measure a clock on a mountain. You might never watch the delicate hush of a wave of space-time pass through a detector. And yet, every night when you fall asleep, you practice what the cosmos practices. You relax into the shape of what holds you, and you let go. Let us return, lightly, to the notion of straightness. If you draw a straight line on paper, it is straight within the paper's flatness. If you draw a straight line on an orange peel, that line might look bowed when you try to lay the peel flat. In the same way, when we've imagined the cosmos as a flat map, we must remember that the map is not the shawl. The true straightness is always measured by the traveler, by the one who moves and does not push side to side. Stars and planets and light itself trust this kind of straightness, and in doing so, they teach us a softer form of faith. As you lie here, the curve of the mattress becomes a small analog of the curve of space. Where your shoulder rests, the fabric dips. Where your knees settle, the dip is different. A marble set on that surface would find routes that you could predict if you traced the shape. Gravity is not so different, except that it is not the marble that rolls, but everything that moves, and the surface is not beneath but everywhere. The sweetness of the idea is that nothing needs to be dragged or scolded into orbit. Elegance replaces effort. We can also listen for the ways curvature humbles us. A beam of light passing near a heavy cluster of stars can be split and scattered in graceful curves, offering us multiple images of one distant galaxy, like a portrait painted in several mirrors. That gentle trick, called a lens made of gravity, is not deception, but revelation. It tells us, softly, about mass we cannot see and paths we did not know were there. By reading these arcs, by learning their alphabet, we peek behind the curtain and trace the hidden hands of the cosmos. Some nights, if you step outside and give your eyes a moment to adjust, the sky feels like a dome. But if you stay longer and let your attention settle like snow in still air, the dome opens into depth. You realize the light gathered on your retina began its journey before anyone alive now took their first breath. And maybe it began before your language had words for the colors you are seeing. That you can receive such light at all is a kindness of curvature. The path that light took was not straight on a grid, but straight in the world's true geometry, hugging subtle arcs, rounding past invisible hollows, threading the shawl. Breathe gently. If you worry that this is all too large, that these ideas are too vast for a heart-seeking rest, remember that the feelings they invite are small and friendly. Curvature says, "Let me carry you." It says, "If you do not force your way, you will arrive along a path that costs less effort and brings more grace. Even on an ordinary day, when you take the long way home around a lake simply because the path is smoother, you are honoring the same truth. The world is not a chessboard, it is a garden. The shortest path can be a curve, and the curve can be a kindness. Sometimes we craft images to help us hold these truths without squeezing them. We say that space is a trampoline and that masses are heavy balls that make dents. These pictures are not perfect, but they are gentle ladders. Climb them as far as comfort allows and then rest. Know that the real fabric needs no up or down, and that the bending is not toward anything, but within everything. Know also that the bending does not always feel like bending. Often it feels like quiet, like the smoothness of a road that you only appreciate after a rough detour. If you could listen to the universe itself hum, you might hear different notes for different kinds of curves. There is the low, patient note of a star's field, the mid-tone of a planet's presence, and the faint, bell-like chime of a ripple passing after a distant merging. And there is the almost silent, almost unmeasurable murmur of expansion, the way the entire hall seems to grow a little larger between the first and last bars of a long symphony. These notes do not compete, they harmonize. They tell the same story in different registers. Space is alive enough to bend and kind enough to guide. Rest in that kindness. Let your own timeline ease. Nearby clocks take at slightly different paces depending on their hills and hollows. And your body, too, keeps its own variety of times. The breath time, the heartbeat time, the drifting into dreams time, the time inside your thoughts that stretches when you are curious and shrinks when you are content. If the universe accommodates so many tempos, you can allow yourself to slow down tonight without apology. You can live in a gentler second and trust that the rest of the world will still be there when you wake. We might end with a last picture, a final lull. Imagine standing in a field at night, the air cool and soft, the ground scent rising after a long warm day. Above you, the Milky Way arches like a river of frost. That arch is a curve across the sky. Yes, but beneath it is a deeper curve, the curve of space itself, holding the river in its bed. You do not need to understand all the mathematics embroidered along its edges to be soothed by it. It is enough that the river flows and that its flow is gentle. So why does space bend? Because matter and energy are present, like sleepers settling into a shared quilt. Because the universe is not a rigid frame, but a living geometry, one that honors the presence of each thing by making a little room, a little rounding, a little guidance. And because straightness, as living things experience it, is not stubbornness, but cooperation. To move straight is to move wisely through a curved world, following the invitation of the fabric rather than fighting it. Now let the answer become a feeling rather than a phrase. Let it become the softness in your throat as you exhale, the warmth in your hands as you settle them beside you, the slight heaviness in your eyelids as they lower. The same universe that bends space so that planets can circle stars also bends your night so that sleep can curve in best. I'd you. You are not being pulled anywhere. You are being invited to rest along a path of least insistence. Follow it, trust it, drift. As you float toward dreams, the fabric around you becomes a cradle, a gentle dip that asks nothing but your willingness to be held. The stars above, the atoms within, the long histories of light and time and dust, all of them cooperate in this one small mercy, that when you are ready, you can let go, and in letting go you follow the truest line of all. Good night, traveler. May your path be curved and kind. Good night.